First off, we're starting kind of at the beginning of the video, and it's I've kind of titled my little segment on this as NT Studies Issues. So there was at the very beginning there was a lot of discussion on like New Testament studies, the problems that plague New Testament studies, and what your position, and they collectively group all mythicists together, which so I could say our position is about New Testament studies. So I've got some very poignant or some very pointed clips worked in here, but also I've got at least one quote that I'm also going to bring up from Hector Avalos. So if you're ready there, Rick, we can go on ahead and go to the video.
He focuses this blog on this second group that he talks about of scholars who don't check their sources, apparently. But he also references in the introduction that a lot of scholars that are Christians affirm the historicity of Jesus simply because they're Christians, and seems to be like the insinuation is that you can't trust Christian scholars. And I've seen Godless Engineer, who's one of his disciples, say this constantly. You can't trust Christian scholars. They sign statements of faith and all this sorts of thing. But what I find interesting about that is you have Richard Carrier, who's this anti-theistic counter-apologist who argues against the Christian faith. And supposedly he's not biased, but these Christian scholars are biased, and you can't trust them. And so you mentioned...
Okay, so I know I'm stopping this a little quick. Oh, you're muted there, Rick.
He immediately conflated just any bias with a faith dogma you cannot abandon. Like, these are not the same thing. So everybody's biased. That's the point of objective methodologies, is to allow you to make arguments that bypass your bias, right? That's the whole point of methodology. But the thing that I said about Christians, that's that's another point as well, is that, as you see, the people who can read on the screen, it doesn't affect my ideology whether Jesus existed or not. Like, a historical Jesus is totally compatible with my worldview. And I used to, as an atheist, defend vehemently a historical Jesus. And I'm fine with that, right? So that's not an existential threat to my ideology. But the non-existence of Jesus is an existential threat to almost all modern Christianity. You can come up with a logically possible version of Christianity that would be compatible with the non-existent of Jesus. And there have been a few fringe people who've tried to build that out. But in terms of popular Christianity, the Christianity that most people believe in, and I'm sure Potential Theist is an example, definitely James McGrath is an example, the non-existence of Jesus would entail that religion was false. And that means that they have to actually seriously entertain the possibility that their religion is false. And that's too much of a threat. And so what I find is that generally you get a defensive reaction rather than a rational reaction. So that the moment you question the historicity of Jesus, it's all hands on deck. We have to defend the faith, rather than, oh, that's an interesting possibility. What kind of evidence is there for that? So that's why it's not really possible to rely on Christian scholars in this, because they get so caught up in apologetics defending the faith that they can't actually objectively look at the evidence on this particular thing, because it's too much of a threat, like too much. Now, at the same time, I've simultaneously said that you cannot use this fact to argue against Christianity, because the non-existence of Jesus is too uncertain. I give it a fairly high percentage probability, like 1 in 3, that there was a historical Jesus. So that's a weak argument against Christianity as a faith. You do much better granting historicity of Jesus and attacking resurrection apologetics. Much more successful at that, because then you're dealing with claims that have massively low probabilities, and so it's super easy to refute Christianity that way. These are not the related things, and I think that all of these things are being conflated here. Bias versus existential threat versus are we arguing against Christianity? I'm not. I think this is a stupid argument and useless argument against Christianity. So all of this is wrong. But this is another example where he's reading into the things I said that are not there and coming out with something I didn't say that actually contradicts things that I have said multiple times in various other places. So that's a kind of like reading in bad faith. Like he wants this to have meant a certain thing. He got defensive, created a straw man of what I said, and then defended the faith, right? Like, oh, we're all objective and reliable, right? Like that was his whole attack there. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it's funny that in attempting to critique the thing I'm talking about, he did the thing that I'm talking about. So that just illustrates the point there. Good clip. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, so another thing is that I don't know if I got this in my clip, but I do remember McGrath saying that if Jesus had not physically existed, it wouldn't affect his faith at all. What do you think about that?
I doubt that. I actually seriously doubt it, because without the historical existence of Jesus, there's no resurrection. If there's no resurrection, our faith is in vain, as Paul says, right? So I'm seriously skeptical of that. And based on the things that McGrath writes, like you can go to his website and see the things that he defends there. He's definitely on the liberal side of Christian scholarship, right? So he's not like a fundamentalist by any means. But I seriously doubt that he would happily switch to an ahistorical Jesus version of Christianity and still be a faithful Christian. Seems unlikely to me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that he definitely said that in the interview, because he was very vehement about how pointless it is to like argue against the historicity of Jesus. And that was like one of the points that he made for somebody in the chat.
And that's an example of where he thinks that I'm arguing against, but this is an attack on Christianity, right? That's another conflation argument. I'm not. Actually, I've argued that you can't do that. Like, this is not a good argument against Christianity. Well, but he took it at that. He takes it that way. But the other thing is he flatly contradicts himself multiple times in this video. We'll probably get to examples where he insists, even swears on thing, and then half an hour later he says exactly the opposite. I've caught McGrath doing that a lot. You can go onto my blog and look up James McGrath in my search engine. Lots of articles where I document him doing this over and over again. It's kind of his modus operandi. Another
quote that I wanted to share real quick for this first section here, like I said, is Dr. Avalos. So it's this from Hector Avalos in The End of Biblical Studies. I got the Kindle locations. I don't have the physical book, but most biblical scholars in academia are still ministers or believers with specific denominational affiliations. Most religious studies programs in public institutions espouse a liberal or pluralistic approach to religion that frowns on criticism of religion as a whole. Even more resisted is the criticism of specific religious traditions. Like this is, of course, this is Hector Avalos who wrote this, but there are plenty of other studies done on the problems with New Testament studies.
Yeah, I'd call attention to the late, great Hector Avalos. In The End of Biblical Studies, unlike a lot of critiques of things like this, he has a whole section, probably like several chapters, on liberal Christian scholarship and what's wrong with it and why it is not a solution to conservative Christian scholarship. A lot of people just attack conservative Christian scholarship, forget that liberal stuff exists, and assume they've attacked Christianity. Avalos's book is actually one of the few that does a detailed attack on liberal approaches to interpreting the Bible, or reinterpreting the Bible, as he would say it. So I highly recommend that book. And you know, obviously, for people who don't know, Hector Avalos was a professor of biblical studies and wrote on all subjects, both Old Testament and New, early Christianity as well as ancient Judaism. So he knows what he's talking about. And he himself came from an evangelical background. So he definitely knows what he's talking about. He's been there on the other side of the wall, as it were.
Definitely. Okay. So we still got a little bit more to go in this clip. So we're getting to a fun part here in a minute.
This mythical Christ wouldn't shake your faith. And what I find interesting is you have progressive Christians that deny the bodily resurrection of Jesus. They deny the virgin birth. Why would it be a problem to go a step further and deny that Jesus was a historical person? You know what I mean? So
I want to stop real quick right here, because this is the first time, and maybe I'm just ignorant, but this is the first time that I've heard that there's like a substantial, at least substantial enough to be mentioned, of Christians that deny the bodily resurrection.
What I would want to know is potential theist, why does he not say he's one of them? So this is the kind of rhetoric that I see a lot. So William Lane Craig did this in a debate he had with Eddie Tabash. Eddie Tabash goes in, and it's is Christianity true, I think was the subject. And he goes in and he gives a whole discourse on how hell, the very doctrine of hell, has to be false, and therefore Christianity is false. And William Lane Craig gets up there and does the whole thing about how, Christians don't have to believe in it. And that's it. That was his argument. And it's like, you're a liar. Like, you're not even defending your own faith. You believe in hell. And it's the kind of thing, like, it's like defend Christianity at all costs, even if we have to lie about what our own beliefs are. And do this in this false light way where notice potential theist and William Lane Craig never said that they don't believe in hell or the resurrection in this case. They said, oh, there are Christians who do it, right? And so, but why is that relevant to your belief, right? Like, if there are Christians who are okay with this, why aren't you one of them? Is the question, right? And the other thing is, like, liberal Christianity that deny, like, what he means by deny the physical resurrection. They don't actually. They deny the traditional resurrection of the flesh model. They adopt restoration of existence in another form, right? And that actually, in my opinion, was the original Christian teaching. And so it's not that liberals like deny that there was any resurrection. They deny the particular stories of it in the Bible. They said those are metaphors and allegories for the truth, like the real resurrection that we will experience in some fashion or other. And then there's like a very small segment, liberal scholars, who actually are just cultural Christians and don't buy into any idea of the afterlife or the resurrection. But again, they're very small, very few of those people, and they still need Jesus to be real. That's why they still defend the existence of Jesus, because if Jesus didn't exist, then he can't have been inspired by God, and then the things he said can't be any more meaningful than what Buddha said, whatever, right? So, and the only way to get Christianity out of the box as a distinctive religion that you should believe in is if there's a real guy that you're worshiping, right? And it is possible, like I said, it's logically possible to construct a Christianity where you're worshiping what you would recognize as a fictional person. It's just that's not popular, and that is not what most Christians do. And those Christians aren't in this debate. Like a lot of them are probably saying, "Yeah, I'm probably on board with mythicism being plausible." They're not the ones defending the faith. They're not the ones on this video here. And so that's the thing. It's like in the very act of trying to defend themselves, they're actually revealing the point that I made is correct.
To be clear, I believe Potential Theist confirmed that he's a non-theist.
I didn't know that.
Okay. I've always been confused about the potential theism title, but because he's always seemed like a non-theist, I guess.
Well, he seems to speak as though it's his community, the believers. So I didn't know that. Yeah,
but I was just genuinely confused. I guess because of how I was brought up. In Christianity, like this whole idea, the resurrection didn't happen, or it wasn't like a historical thing, like that's just never been like a normal thing around me or anything that I've seen.
Right. To be fair to them, like you grew up in a conservative religious tradition, and so I think they're trying to say that they're trying to throw all evangelicals and all literalist Catholics under the bus. They're trying to throw like 90% of Christians under the bus and defend Christianity by retreating to the 10% of Christians, right, that aren't those people. But that's not who's here on this video. So, well, Kip Davis, we know, is an unbeliever, but he was raised in a conservative tradition, so he knows that what he's saying is false in quite a lot of Christian traditions.
So just wanted to clear that up real quick. But anyways, we'll continue on with this because, of course, Kip is going to talk here in a minute, and it's just not going to bode well for him.
I don't understand the poisoning of the well of they're Christians, so you can't trust them.
He goes even a step further than that too. In what I've seen, you can't trust anyone within the field because we've all been trained by Christian scholars as well. Even Jewish scholars who work in Second Temple Judaism, Roman antiquity, and the New Testament have apparently been trained by Christians and have had their minds poisoned towards affirming this idea through nothing more than simple loyalty to the guild, which really is silly. And I think what it does, maybe as much as anything else, is it betrays an astonishing lack of awareness and familiarity with even how the guild works. Those of us within it, I've often said, those of us within biblical scholarship often will look at things that Carrier and other mythicists say and claim about the field of biblical scholarship and go, like, that just looks nothing like my experience working with other scholars.
So the question that I have after hearing that spiel, right? Like, this is just not something that Kip has experienced in his time in the field, right? So I was like, well, what does represent his experience in the field as far as the trustworthiness of like biblical studies or New Testament studies? And I got a clip for that.
Nice.
It's a little long where he tells a story, and so we're going to listen to the entire story of it. And so just to put this in context here, this is Kip's normal experience in biblical studies. Okay, just keep that in mind.
Somebody can sign a statement of faith and work at a school demanding one and still be a good scholar. See, because I don't think people really understand how these things work. And from my own experience, I haven't had to do this very often, but I did work at a Christian university where I did have to sign a statement of faith. And the first time I went to sign it, I sat down and I looked at it, and it had like 8 points. I don't remember what they were, so don't ask. But I remember looking at the 8 points, and I was like, well, this is okay, and this is okay. Not this one, not this one. Maybe this one, not this one. And at the bottom, it said check that you agree to everything and sign it, or check those that you disagree with and include a written statement about your disagreements. So this is what I did. And this is like one of the first courses I'd ever taught. So I was new at this. So I typed out, some stuff, and I was ready to staple it onto the contract and sign it and just send it in. And then I had a thought. I was like, I should run this by my department head. And so I went to go see my department head. I was like, hey, I'm signing my contract. I've got this thing. I'm not entirely sure what to do with it. So I've checked everything off here that, I have issues with. I've attached my position paper. And he looks at me and goes, what are you doing?
That was asked.
I'm supposed to do this, aren't I? He says, no. He says, just sign it.
Just sign it and shut up.
Yes. He said, and this is what he told me. He says, it was something like, the fewer excuses we give admin to dig around into what we're doing here, the better. Because this is a Christian university with powerful, wealthy board members who have, kids who take, or grandkids who take classes. And, when word gets back to them about the how badly all of us in the biblical studies department have sold out to the Enlightenment, there was always hell to pay, and it was a headache. So I say that just to kind of point out that just because you sign a statement of faith, and I did this several times, I didn't believe half of it. And I have no doubt that I was not alone in this.
Yeah.
I think at seminaries and Bible colleges all across North America, there are guys who are like holding their nose and signing their name, and then you just teach, and then you publish. I published. So the very first article that I ever published after I had signed this statement of faith was all about gender in the Hebrew Bible.
Oh boy.
Okay. Nobody cared. Nobody came after me. Nobody said anything. So this idea that your publications are strictly controlled by your institution is nonsense. Most places are just happy that you're writing something and publishing it, because that's good.
So let me get this straight. Maybe this is how I understand it. All over the country at seminaries and Bible colleges and all that, you have professors who are signing their work agreements with statements of faith, and they're planning on not honoring that. But in planning not honoring that, they admit that if anything gets back to the administration, there's hell to pay. So this does not help Kilp's position in my opinion.
This is a good example of false examples. So he says, well, I wrote a paper on gender in the Bible, but he never established that it said anything that contradicted anything in the faith statement. He never said that anyone noticed, right? That checked, like, did a parent find out about the paper? Did it actually contradict some actual faith doctrine? Did they go to the administration? Right. And, one could also point out, by his own admission, he's no longer working there. So one can wonder, how long do you think he could have gone on, and how close to the third rail does he honestly think he could have gotten there before he would have been fired? Doing some obscure thing about gender in the Old Testament. I seriously doubt half the people that would be concerned would even understand what that was talking about. But he's also not even explained what it said that was even contrary to the doctrine and faith statement. So it's a false example. Like, it doesn't establish anything. The other thing is, we have tons of examples of the third rail getting hit. Mike Lacona. We could go, down the list, even M. David Litwa, right? We could just go through the list of people who've gotten trashed because they touched the third rail. What Kip's saying is complete nonsense. Now, there is truth in the sense that he is strawmanning the position that I have taken, right? He strawmans all the time. And so I've never said that historians could never say anything out of the line. What I've said is, like, there are certain things that are going too far, and if you are too public about them, there will be consequences. Those consequences may be getting fired. It's certainly at the school he's talking about. He just admitted that would have happened if enough people got annoyed by something that he said that contradicted a faith statement. He would get fired. That's literally what he said, if people read between the lines. But also, there's other ways to punish people, right? So even someone who has tenure can get punished. You can punish them by fucking with them politically. You can give them, like, swamp them with committee assignments. You can alter their office. There's all kinds of things you do to fuck with people, but also you can just fuck with them, right? So like just microaggressions and harassment can wear people down, and people know this. This is why, like, when Lataster and I both spoke with Philip Davies about this. Now, when Philip Davies was alive, we kept this quiet because he wanted us to. Is that he expressed all this to us, that he had these fears, that even he was retired. Like, there wasn't really any direct way to attack him, but you could attack his reputation. He could be vilified, he could be belittled, he could be ridiculed. And that's all the things that Ehrman did to me when I came out as this, right? So this is exactly what Philip Davies saw this. He saw Ehrman doing it to me. And he had seen all this done to Thomas Thompson like decades ago. And so the field still remembers what happened to Thomas Thompson. And so the field still has this fear. And I always talk about the example of what's called the panopticon. You can look it up online. It's a philosophical concept. And the panopticon is a thing where it's imagining a situation where you think everybody is watching you, even though they're not really most of the time. But just because you think they are, you modify your behavior to conform to what you think might be the third rail. And so that it doesn't matter whether the perception is true. All that matters is that it is what you perceive. And so the same thing, I think, with Philip Davies, where there wasn't really any way anybody could have hurt him. But I'm not going to just out and say that to him. Hey, you loser, you should just come out and say that you're a doubter of historicity. No, because I sympathized, I understood with his situation. I was outside the guild in a way that they could never touch me. They can, ridicule me and do all the shit that they, slander me and all the shit that they do. But because I have my own fan base and I'm patron supported, I'm immune to that, right? Like, and also because I have a thick skin and I'm good at fighting back. So, but most people, I've spoken to a lot of people who don't want to do that. I remember, this is unrelated to this topic, but I did a survey of articles many years ago on women in philosophy, atheist women in philosophy in particular. And a lot of women at that time, several took me up, and I have their interviews on my blog. But a lot of them didn't want to. And the reason they gave me was this, is say, well, look, yeah, I'm an atheist, but I'm also a woman in philosophy. I take a ton of shit for being a woman in philosophy. You're asking me to go public about being an atheist as well. You're doubling the amount of shit that I have to take. It's like, I don't want to do that. I just want to do my own work. I want to be left alone. Right. So, and so that it's not like that they're going to be fired for being an atheist or anything like that. It's just they're going to take shit for it. And that's a lot of emotional labor. They don't want to deal with it. And so a lot of people just don't want to deal with it. And that's the whole point of this kind of ridiculing and harassment and stuff like that, is to make people not to want to have to deal with it. And so it's social pressure in that sense. So that also exists, right? So that all of this happens. And I think most of the fears that keep people quiet are not real. I think that if they came out, it would go much better for them than they thought. But they believe that it won't. And that's why a lot of people remain quiet. That's why Philip Davies remained quiet to his death. And so I know and this is in the guild. So I fucking know how the guild works. I've been in it. I've seen it. That's why I don't want to be in it, because it fucking sucks. And so that's why I'm not there. But I know how it works. And so the thing is that you get a snowball effect, however, that the more people who start coming out, and the more prestigious they are who start coming out, then more people start feeling comfortable coming out. And you've seen that. I've seen this happen since 2014. That's why we're going to probably get to a clip about my list. The list has grown from 6 people to over 40. Now, why do you think that is? In some cases, it's people who already were doubters before I published that I didn't know about. But a lot of them are people who sort of came close to touching the third rail and did it safely. Like, a lot of them will be like, well, I'm still a historicist, but I think it should be taken seriously. It's actually possible there wasn't Jesus, right? And so, James Crossley is an example where he wrote the preface to Raphael Lataster's peer-reviewed book criticizing the historicity of Jesus. The book is Questioning the Historicity of Jesus. That's essentially coming out as saying, oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to give this a premature endorsement by a prestigious biblical scholar. Now, would that have happened had I not published? I don't think so. Would that have happened had Hector Avalos not come out and said, yeah, I actually think there's maybe a 50-50 chance Jesus existed? I don't know. And even Philip Davies, who didn't come out, nevertheless scolded. He wrote a public article scolding scholars like Bart Ehrman for trying to ridicule mythicists out of the field. I mean, Ehrman literally said, you can't get hired if you're a mythicist. So that's a veiled threat, right? Like, we all know what that means. And Philip Davies knew what it meant. And that's why he wrote a whole article to say, no, you fucking stop that right now. And then there have been several others. Justin Meggitt and various others have written articles explaining, like, look, you need to cool it. with this sort of veiled threat business and start taking mythicism seriously. And so and as that happens, you get a snowball effect. And now we've got over 40 people who are at least saying that this needs to be taken more seriously than it has been. That's how the guild works. And it is more based on fear and prestige than on rational evidence-based reasoning, in my opinion. And I think that is largely because there's so much Christian money and power involved in this field. Like, you don't get this with Hercules studies. There's no threat to losing your grants or losing your fan base if you deny the historicity of Hercules. You're not going to get harassed for it, right? Like, that's kind of thing. So you're not going to get ridiculed for it. But you deny the historicity of Jesus, you will, as people see how I get treated. How do you think that makes them feel about the effect of them coming out? And then here they do in this same video, they do this over and over again. Like, even we're going to get to McGrath later, where I don't know if you have the part where he swears that he agrees that the evidence for Jesus is weak or whatever. And then, like,
that's our next section.
40 minutes later, he's like, oh, mythicism is like creationism, right? It's like, wait a minute. So now you're saying that the evidence is as good as for evolution. You've just flipped 100%. Right? That kind of bullshit pisses me off because it's so fucking dishonest. It's like, pick a lane. Like, let's hear your true self. Let's not hear the facade that you put on to make yourself look good. And then half an hour later, you've Mott and Bailey'd me and you've gone to, you're just a crazy creationist. Mythicism is creationism. That is how the guild acts. That's the guild. And that's kind of like what my article is about, where I show, like, even like the sincere, nice people in the field who aren't threatening anybody over this and don't want anybody to be threatened over this, they still have these weird reasons for believing in historicity. And in this video, they'll only mention a few of them. They hardly deal with my article at all. But even when they do touch on my article, they never once ever touch on the evidence in my article. And we might get some examples there where I'll be able to point this out. But where I take an example and I show the evidence of what happens when you check to prove that they're not checking. Now, when you find scholar after scholar after scholar after scholar after scholar doing this same thing over and over and over and over again, you have found a trend. You have now established what is the norm in the field. And that's what my article does. And it does it with evidence. Now, in this video, they completely ignore all the evidence and they just try to gainsay things that I said. But in doing so, they literally demonstrate my entire point, because there's so many things in here in this video where they didn't check. And some of them are really doozers, where the Kip Davis is going to have a real foot in the mouth, like big time, because he didn't check. He just acted like a Christian apologist, spewed off something with total confidence, like Donald Trump, blah, blah, blah. That's completely false and wildly wrong, and easily disproved. Why? Why would he do that? Like, what if you don't know what you're talking about? Don't make assertions in it. So why do that? Like, what is Kip Davis doing? Like, what is the point of that? So there's something psychological going on there. It's like, why is he doing that? And you need to ask why he keeps doing that. Like, why is this his modus operandi? What's going on there? Because he's an unbeliever. He's not defending the faith. So what is he defending, and why is he doing it that way? Anyway, we'll get to examples as we get later on.
Yeah. There's a little bit more in this section, so I'll just play it. If you got something to say, just let me know, okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the things that really jumped out at me in this particular blog post that you wanted us to talk about, was that he provides this really wonderful example of the fact that he is either not capable of reasoning logically or is dishonest, right? He says that for somebody who is a person of faith to entertain the possibility that Jesus didn't exist, he said they must first admit their religion is false. And that's just bizarre, right? They must entertain the possibility. They must be open to the possibility that religion is false. You don't have to start by determining your religion is false, and only then can you accurately just, And, he is, it's no different with the ardent mythicist, right? Whose beliefs are reinforced by a community that affirms, his genius is being affirmed by all of his fans.
Yeah, pause it there. So McGrath sucks at logic. I've demonstrated this multiple times on my blog, so you go check. It's a good example of that, right? So he's mistaken the point, right? The issue is that it is not, if you're going to entertain the possibility that Jesus didn't exist, you do have to entertain the possibility that your religion is false. But you can't get to Jesus didn't exist without admitting your religion is false, right? It's like he doesn't understand the difference between those two positions. So the difference is, in one of those situations, you're defending the faith, and therefore we can't really count on your judgment, right? But in the other, well, you're seriously looking at the evidence with a serious possibility that you will abandon your faith. And like, you don't see that happen very often, right? We see people abandon their faith when they look at evidence. And so that does happen. Even scholars, Kip Davis, I assume, is an example where I assume he was a scholar at some point he was still a Christian. Something finally snapped for him, and he said, actually checking the evidence that kills this for me. So he was able to cross that Rubicon, right? But that's what you have to do. That's the only way you can get to a conclusion that Jesus didn't exist, is you have to cross that Rubicon. And that is what is absolutely too terrifying for most Christians to do, except the ones who actually do leave. And certain, like I said, fringe, very rare liberal Christians who can somehow reconcile the non-existence of Jesus with their faith, as Thomas Brodie did. Thomas Brodie was a Catholic, and he was advocate for the non-existence of Jesus. He had some sort of weird allegorical way of reinterpreting it. The Catholic Church shut him up. Literally, they retired him. They told him to retire and never publish. And that literally happened. In fact, I'm trying to get the rulings. Like, they were published, but they're published in this Vatican publication. It's almost impossible to get. So I'm trying to get copies of it, but it literally happened where they actually did an inquest, and they said the ruling was that you can no longer publish. We don't trust you to publish on this subject anymore because we can't have our own people talking about the non-existence of Jesus, which is another perfect example. And that's, of course, that's not the guild. That's the Vatican. That's a whole different, that's the worst guild you could ever work in. But nonetheless, it exemplifies what we're talking about. But that's the thing, is it's the fear of approaching that rail that is going to put you in a defensive mode. And thus you're not going to be able to look at things objectively. And we have, not only do I say that that's the case, I have concrete examples of that happening. And so it's not just something where I'm just saying it's happening. It's like, I see it happening. And so now I'm like pointing out, I'm explaining why that happens. So, and of course, it's funny that McGrath himself is going to do that several times in this video. Anyway, he's in defensive mode now, so he's trying to defend his rationality despite the absence of it, really.
And it's hard to consider the possibility that one might be wrong in that, with that level of pandering that he receives. And so, I mean, it's part and parcel of scholarship for those of us who at least try to do it honestly and do it well, that we have to be open to the possibility that we're wrong.
What I like is that he was saying right there that basically you are incapable of entertaining the idea that you might be wrong because you get so much praise from everybody. At another point, he claimed that if he turned mythicist, he could get a 6-figure book deal. Now, I did not know you were rolling in a 6-figure book deal there, Dr. Carrier. But I mean,
yeah. I mean, maybe if I sold out, I could do that. Like, I'm not sure. But doesn't that actually argue for my position? Right? Like, so like if it's so easy to do that for me to just make money, clearly then I'm not doing this for the money, then I might be right. Like, I'm so certain I'm right. I have such good evidence that I'm right that I'm literally turning down 6-figure deals to maintain the truth. That's the extent of my integrity, is that intense. Now, I'm not saying that's the case. That's his argument. It's a dumb argument. He sucks at logic. But that's what he just basically said. No, I mean, it's remotely possible that if I decided to become a complete creepy liar, like most preachers and whatnot, that I could make bank off of that, certainly. Because that's what all religious people with charisma, not all, like with many religious people with charisma do, is con Christians out of money. And we've got countless examples. You could go check the internet news reels for countless examples of this. We know that's the case. But that doesn't have anything to do with whether Jesus existed or not. We should be talking about the evidence, not all this bullshit. This bullshit that they're talking about, this is the example of changing the subject, right? Rather than talk about what my article is about, they've picked some random thing and complained about it for like half an hour. Where are we now? Oh, 5 minutes. We're at 5 minutes. Is that right?
Oh, well, so this is 5 minutes of my clip.
Right. Oh,
but
okay.
It's farther into,
right.
It's probably around the 25
they were doing
minute
it a while.
I
watched the whole video live, when it was live. And so they did it for a while. Yeah. Total waste of time. Like, can we just talk about the evidence? Why are you picking on all these little things that you could find some sort of rhetoric to complain about? Like, they're the easy marks that aren't really relevant to the point of the article. But no, that's changing the subject. That's where they're avoiding talking about the actual subject. And even when they finally force themselves to come around to talk about the actual thing, they will avoid the subject by avoiding the evidence that's in my article. But anyway, that's my comment on that.
All right. We just got a little bit more of this. I can't remember what's right here at the end, but We'll listen to it.
All right. So he goes on to say one can only speculate on Bart Ehrman's reasons: stubbornness, ego, peer pressure, fearing a loss of financial success or social status, family issues. Who knows? And I have a video on this called "An Unemployed Blogger Talks About Bart's Wife" is the name of the video, where he talks about he speculates that the reason that Bart Ehrman kind of poo-poos on the evidence for mythicism is that his wife is a Christian.
And so it's not that it's implausible that somebody might either to keep their job or to be sensitive to what a spouse might find offensive, might refrain from arguing certain things. Once you have Bart Ehrman drawing the conclusions that he does, it seems to me that it doesn't seem to me, if nothing that he's published thus far about the Bible or about religion is going too far with his wife, then I think his wife is perfectly okay with the fact that they don't see eye to eye on things.
Yeah, that's almost verbatim what I said. Once again, they're taking things, this is quote mining, so they're taking things out of context and reading into them what isn't there. So what has happened here is, in reality, in the real world, instead of the fantasy world that they've constructed here, in the real world, someone asked me, could it be because of his wife? And then I gave an answer. I said, probably not, but here's some reasons how it could be the case. And I gave reasons why probably not. And my reasons for probably not are the exact same ones that McGrath just gave. Now, other people have made that argument to me multiple times. And so when I do list, when people ask, like, what are the possibilities? I say, well, we don't know. There's a bunch of possibilities. Now, list a bunch of possibilities. This will be one of them. But at no point have I ever said the reason Ehrman takes the position he's doing is because of his wife. I've never argued that. It's just usually on the list of things because a lot of people talk about it and it comes up a lot. And even then I say it's a possibility. And the one place where I come anywhere close to like affirming it at all, I immediately afterwards say, but it's probably just status quo bias, right? He's more concerned about his peers than about his wife's opinion of what he thinks about Jesus. So it's, that's the actual thing that I said. And it's much more nuanced and complex than the bullshit that they just spun. But notice that they just strawmanned and fabricated and all of this has just happened. And why are we talking about this? What does this have to do with my article? Do you see my problem here? Like, this is all distraction. This is all sideshow. This is bullshit. Like, where they still haven't gotten to my article or anything relevant in this content. So, yeah.
Would this classify as the technical definition of bullshit?
Yeah, I've often talked about the Frankfurt definition of bullshit. He wrote a book called Bullshit. I think it's called On Bullshit. And for people who want to know, like his definition of the technical term of bullshit, bullshit is different from lying. The liar cares about the truth. That's why they're lying. A bullshitter doesn't care what's true. They just want you to believe what they're saying. So it doesn't even matter to them whether it's true or not. That's bullshit. So in this particular case, no, I think it matters to them what's true, but I'm not really sure because like I can explain, the whole is it Hanlon's law? I don't know. There's a certain rule with the idea that you shouldn't attribute to malice what can just as easily be explained by incompetence. Now there are many occasions where I can show that it is not easily explained by incompetence. It has to be malice. But I have to give evidence for that. And I do. Whenever I say that, I give evidence for it. But in this case, I think it's just incompetence. I think that when Potential Theist went off and did that, I don't think he did it dishonestly. I just think he's bad at reading. He's following these methodologies where he's importing things into the text. He's ignoring things that are in the text. He's getting out of it what he wants there to have been. And then he creates a straw man and defeats it. And then he feels good about himself for having done that. Like, I think it's all sincere. It's just incompetent. I don't think he's lying. I don't think he knows the truth about what I actually said. I think he's deceived himself into thinking I said something that I didn't.